Let's take a look at some information and charts on Sushi for Brave New Coin. So Sushi is a fork of Uni. Uni has since attempted to protect their code legally. Sushi has a semi-anonymous team, I guess you could say. Sushi had an issue with the dev taking all the funds initially, was encouraged to return those funds, become a legitimate enterprise, and here we are today, where Sushi's the number 2 DEX behind Uni, based on TVL and volume. Unlike Uni, they have a bit of a looser restriction on what can get listed, what can get traded. You'll see a bunch of crazy stuff that you've never heard of scrolling through Sushi pairs. They can probably try to avoid regulatory scrutiny more than Uni, I'd say. I don't know if that's going to help them in the long run, but they're going to run from the long arm of the law probably as long as they can in that regard. Unlike Uni, Sushi has a variety of different things, a buffet of options to do with Sushi. They're multi-chain, lending, borrowing, staking, all sorts of fun stuff here. 14 chains. So the analytics get a little more difficult to figure out what's going on, because unless you're looking at every chain and all those incentives, you don't really get a true picture. You definitely want to focus on the highest volume stuff, the highest TVL stuff. That's where most of the activity is going to be anyway, but you don't get the full picture. Just like Uni and any other DEX, the swapping stuff is stupid simple. This is exactly what needs to happen for people to actually use something. Just do something really well, make it easy to use, clean UI. They've done that. All of Ethereum arguably is on board with this. You can connect MetaMask or hardware wallet or whatever you want, and off you go, swapping anything to anything else. They even have limit orders, and you're going to increasingly see centralized exchange familiarity on DEXs over time, which is exactly what they needed to do. You need to compete with each other. You need to compete with all the other chains. You need to compete with all the other centralized exchanges. So there's a lot to think about, obviously, when you're a DEX dev. But Sushi, Uni are definitely headed in the right direction in that regard. They at one point in time in the lending and borrowing market, I don't know if they do anymore. It looks like nothing's listed here. So this may be temporarily disabled, not quite sure. But there's almost too much to talk about in a single video for Sushi as far as what you can do on the platform. Tons of farms, tons of crazy pairs, tons of crazy APYs, right? All sorts of fun stuff if you want to get super deep into what's going on with the chain here. In general, though, most of the popular stuff is going to be the typical stablecoins, ETH pairs, BTC pairs. Link, for some reason, is always up there. And the rewards are a little different than Uni, so something else to consider. I think they have to sort of incentivize stuff in a different way to bring TVL to Sushi from Uni or from any other DEX. They also have staking, which I mentioned. Not going to fully break all this down, but just know that there's a ton of stuff and things you can do on that DEX in increasing amount as well. They're just continually adding more and more stuff. TVL just continues to increase over time here, sitting on around 4 billion, up from 2 billion in July. Volumes kind of flat. TVL basically recovering since May 18th, since that triple bottom. A lot of this is underlying notional value as well rising here, but there isn't just a mass exodus from Sushi that I can see. Volumes are problematic and troublesome. You see this on 1 inch as well. You don't want volumes declining. You don't want big spikes and peaks and all that sort of stuff. You want what the TVL looks like, where just slow rise over time, just a continuation of steady volumes over time. So not super bearish, but you definitely want more volume over time. And as a slice of the pie on any given day, they're definitely always going to be number 2, unless there's some catastrophic failure with Uni. And like I already said, as they go multi-chain, this data is going to get a little bit more interesting. But for the most part, it looks like TVL is a Uni show at the moment, even with the incentives on Sushi on any given day. Sushi in the blue there, a sliver of the Uni volume, and on a monthly basis in the purple, Sushi, definitely a significant portion, but not anywhere near Uni type volumes. So currently just heavily in the number 2 spot Another way to look at TVL here on DeFi Llama across all the chains, it's quoting it at 4.5 billion, it looks like. In the USD side of things, ETH, TVL flat, BNB, TVL flat, declining as well. And again, you have to look at all these chains individually, which is going to get tougher to do, but can be done. At least on DeBank, they separate it. Volumes, again, flat, like I said. Transactions, flat, but fine. Users, though, rising. Users at all-time high on ETH. So that's certainly not bearish to see. Just looks like, grassroots people coming. People are coming to that exchange in droves, my friend. I don't know if it's NFTs. I don't know if they've planned to add NFT stuff. I don't know what it is. I don't know why, but looks like people are going. And on Polygon, TVL is flat, but it's there, right? It's just starting. It's in the 600 millions. TVL on Phantom, which I don't even know what that is, down slightly. Volumes basically zero. Transactions flat. Users flat. And XDAI, something else I don't know what that is, TVL flat and just starting. Well, I guess you could argue rising, but anything that's not ETH probably isn't that big of a deal at the moment because that's just where most of the action is sitting. If we look at the supply side revenue for Sushi, they also have a little bit of protocol revenue. So they sit number 3 relative to Aave and Uni. And if we look at the PE ratio, equivalent market cap over annualized revenue ratio, Sushi almost always sits at the bottom of this list, which is bullish. You want to focus on things that are on the left side of this more so than the right side. And relative to Uni, Curve, and Balancer and Bancor, definitely a clear outlier in a good way, in a bullish way. So this, if anything, says that they are undervalued relative to their peers. If we look at the fees on Uniswap versus Sushi, Sushi right up there on a daily basis, on a weekly basis right up there as well. So a considerable amount of fees flowing through Sushi for all sorts of stuff. And if we look at the amount of fees burned, I don't see Sushi on this list unless I'm blind. So it's possible that they've implemented 1559 successfully and people aren't overpaying for stuff like they probably are on other places like OpenSea through MetaMask or whatever. I don't actually know that information, but the fact that they're not on here is probably a good thing. A lot of the high fee burners are probably representative of exchanges or routers that are not predicting gas prices appropriately. People are overpaying right now. Looking at on-chain stats for Sushi, much like all the DeFi tokens, does it really matter at this point in time? I don't know. This might be too early. There's not much else to do with most of this stuff, even though Sushi probably has more utility than your average DeFi token. Transaction counts, basically just flat, rising slightly, not as bearish as some of these other DeFi tokens look. Average transaction values basically just flat, nothing too crazy going on there. NVT, inverse metric of economic utility, is high and falling. Not too much of a read there in general. Active addresses just kind of flat, slightly rising here. So things look less bearish than other coins in that regard, but there's more to do with Sushi on-chain than most other DeFi coins. MVRV, which typically caps out at around a 2x for most currencies, looks like it capped out around 1.5 for Sushi. Currently it's at a 1x multiple, so market cap matches on-chain activity currently. Not too much of a signal here in general just yet, but it's still worth watching over time. Sushiswap on Google Trends capped out at around May 15th, and it's on the rise again after falling a little bit here. If we compare this to Uni, always fun to do. Still a sliver of total searches or interest relative to Uni, but it is rising quicker than Uni is currently. So Sushi, potentially a bit of a dark horse candidate here for DEX domination eventually as they add more utility and more chains. Moving on to technicals, this is a 12-hour 5200 cross VPVR volume RSI. Added a pitchfork as well. A little bit of a triple bottom data viz on here, arguably inverted head and shoulders and or just garden variety W double bottom. There's a mini W in here as well. So a few things. This has broken out of the bearish pitchfork, which is good. In general, if you have a pitchfork, it's going to ping pong around these levels until it breaks out. So it's negated the bearishness there. It's bounced from the midline. It's experienced a bullish cross on the 12-hour, and it's currently sitting in a bunch of volume resistance between 14 and 17. So it probably needs to reconsolidate here before it goes again, but trend-wise, this looks fine for eventually all-time high retest. Volume's kind of flat, slightly rising. No real bear div just yet. This does look like a parabolic move to the upside though, so I'd be careful there. On the cloud, it looks like it's nearly reached its flat Kumo target on the daily, which is around 15. I think a month ago I was saying I liked 14 in, maybe it was July 7th. When it broke through this, or at least attempted to, broke through this pitchfork midline, I said I liked 14. It got denied there, regathered its strength, and then went for another retest. So it reached the 12-hour flat Kumo target. And at this point, anything around 9 or 10 as a pullback looks like a good buy. I'd be careful with anything up here because it's very near its take profit targets based on mean reversion potential. Against BTC, it hasn't really done too much historically. It's had a mixture of inverted head and shoulder type signals, one that didn't go anywhere, one that went somewhere. It had this massive Adam and Eve, or inverted Adam and Eve, Burj Khalifa, Christmas tree, Eiffel Tower thing. Just a lot of volatility here in this range. So it's kind of unexciting for me until it's at the highs again or at the lows again. But on trend, it does look good for bullish continuation through higher highs here. And against ETH, it's never been above the 12-hour 200-day moving average, at least on Coinbase. I like to look at real markets that have these pairs if they exist. That's why I'm looking at this on Coinbase. Almost through the volume resistance, no bear div just yet. This actually looks like the Coinbase stock chart, which is kind of funny. Just a multi-week, multi-month bull div here against ETH. So much like Uniswap, the technicals for the USD pair favor a pullback, whereas against BTC and ETH, they actually look relatively decent based on trend for higher highs. Lastly, I'll just mention the ETH-BTC fund and DeFi portfolio I trade for Techemy Capital and Enzyme.finance, a non-custodial portfolio management tool where you can send ETH or USDC or just watch what I'm doing. You can see AUM allocation, performance, all the DeFi coins I'm in here, all the trades I make in the bottom tab. Here, some of this stuff gets routed through Sushi, Uni, all that's done through Paraswap. The aggregator, you can see me lending and borrowing here on this tab. You can see me holding a bunch of USDC and DAI here still for various yield purposes on the ETH-BTC fund. That's all I have for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.